I first saw the island 3 weeks ago, sometime after midnight, blurry-eyed and strung out on caffeine in the Oceanic Mapping Lab at NOAA's Regional Center in Boston. A satellite ping had returned an anomalous cluster of data just off the eastern seaboard, south of Cape Cod, close to the Georges Bank, open ocean as far as official charts were concerned. But there it was. A clean, triangular landmass. Roughly 7 square miles in area. Clear elevation contours. Vegetation density markers. Even a central ridge line. It appeared in one image taken at 3 hours 14 minutes and 6 seconds, timestamped and verified by 2 separate satellites. It didn't exist in the image taken just 1 minute before, or the one after. At first I assumed it was a glitch, some overlapping artifact from clouds or sonar interference. But the readings were clean. Too clean. As if something had been deliberately placed there to be seen, and then just as deliberately taken away. I flagged the image and pulled records. It took me down a rabbit hole I didn't expect. The most disturbing part? The name. Melridge Island. I sat frozen at my desk. The name had surfaced during my doctoral work on lost colonial settlements. Whispers in letters, half-sentences in coastal town records from the 1700s. It was supposedly wiped out by a Category 4 hurricane in 1952. The last recorded population? 112, and after that, nothing. No survivors. No recovery efforts. And more chillingly, no post-event mapping. As if it had never been there. I found exactly one photo in a microfiche folder of maritime surveys. A grainy black and white aerial shot. The town was visible, symmetrical grid layout, church spire, water tower. A caption in red ink at the bottom read, Melridge, June 2, 1951. Do not return. That was enough to bring it to my director's attention. 2 days later, I was granted special clearance and a privately contracted research vessel, under the Department of Environmental Anomalies and Recovery, DEAR, a quiet branch of Homeland. I'd worked with them before. They didn't ask questions they didn't want answers to. I wasn't going alone. By the time we left Boston Harbor, our crew was 5. Myself, of course. Nora Ruiz, a veteran marine biologist and former naval dive medic. Clay Bennett, an engineer who specialized in geosynchronous mapping arrays. Julie Kim, a documentary filmmaker with a knack for surviving dangerous places. And Lucas Bell, our dear observer. Young, quiet, and far too serious for someone under 30. He wore gloves all the time. Even when shaking hands. The boat was an old retrofitted Coast Guard cutter named the Virgil. She smelled like diesel and salt rot. I didn't mind. I trusted her more than the people who sent us. We left at dawn heading southeast. It took 30 hours to reach the coordinates, marked on our chart as open sea. But the radar told another story. Elevation shift. Heat signatures. Something was there. I barely slept on the journey, flipping through everything I could find on Melridge. Most sources referred to it in the past tense. Some didn't mention it at all. One old Coast Guard file, half-burned and waterlogged, listed Melridge as a containment perimeter breach site. Breach of what, exactly? At 4:12 a.m. on the second day, Lucas knocked on my cabin door. You need to see this, he said. I followed him to the top deck, where Clay had pulled up the radar screen. There. He pointed. The silhouette of land. Sharp and unmistakable. And then, fog. Thick, sudden, unnatural. The wind died. The sea turned to glass. I stepped forward, my heart crawling toward my throat. In the distance, through the mist, I saw rooftops. Church steeples. A water tower. Just as in the photograph. Perfectly preserved. Jesus, Nora whispered beside me. That's a whole town. Melridge, I said aloud as if naming it might wake something. We dropped anchor just offshore. The fog did not lift. But the island remained. Waiting. We should have turned back the moment the compass began to twitch. It started with subtle hesitations. Our GPS units lagged, recalculating positions slower than usual. Then came the drift. Our coordinates would place us simultaneously off the coast of Newfoundland, deep in the Atlantic Trench and near Charleston, South Carolina. None of it made sense. Devices that had never failed before were now useless, blinking question marks where numbers should be. It's not interference, Clay muttered, hunched over his console. It's like the satellites can't agree where we are. Or they're being overridden, Nora added from across the deck, watching her wrist compass rotate in place like a slow, hypnotic eye. The fog hadn't lifted since we first made visual contact with the island. If anything, it had thickened, pressing against the hull of the Virgil like a weight. The water was disturbingly still, like something dead held the current in place. Julie had stopped filming 20 minutes ago, unnerved by the sudden failure of her drone, which dropped into the sea with no warning. Even Lucas seemed tense, eyes scanning the horizon with a stillness that felt unnatural. "We're about 300 yards from the shoreline," I said, checking the radar's ghosting silhouette. We drifted closer without realizing. Julie peered over the bow. "I can see something." We all turned. The fog was thinning, not retreating but unraveling. Threads of it peeled back like curtains, revealing a view so clean, so staged, that my first thought was of an old postcard. Melridge. It rose before us in perfect symmetry. White picket fences, cobblestone streets, rows of charming colonial homes with red shutters and flower boxes. A brick town hall. A tiny schoolhouse with a faded bell tower. The church spire pierced the mist, its iron cross gleaming as if freshly polished. A water tower stood just behind it, emblazoned in fading white paint, Melridge, St. 1719. But there were no people. No animals. No movement. Just perfect, undisturbed preservation. "This is wrong," Nora whispered. The fog lingered like a ring around the island, letting us see only what was directly ahead. Like a spotlight had been cast on the set of a silent play. The ocean lapped against the shallows, but there was no wind. No birds. No insects. Just the sound of our own breathing and the distant creak of the boat. "I'm not seeing electromagnetic interference," Clay said, his voice low. "It's more like directional masking. Something's distorting perception itself." "Could be old military tech," Lucas offered. There were rumors of optical field projects in the 50s. Stealth architecture. Town-sized camouflage. "Except this place isn't hidden," I replied. "It's being shown to us. Deliberately." Julie raised her camera again, but it wouldn't turn on. "That," she cursed under her breath. "I want to go ashore," I said finally. They all looked at me. "I can feel it," I continued, unsure if I was trying to convince them or myself. "We came here to investigate, and this is what we're here for." Nora exhaled slowly. "We'll need to anchor offshore. No telling what's on land." "I'll prep the dinghy," Clay said without looking at anyone. "We'll need to paddle. No motors. Too noisy." Julie hesitated, then nodded. "I'm not letting this vanish without documentation." Lucas didn't speak. He just turned and disappeared into the cabin to collect his pack. We lowered the dinghy quietly. The sea accepted it with barely a ripple. As we rowed toward shore, I felt the temperature drop, not sharply but subtly, like stepping into a room that hadn't been entered in years. The smell changed too. It went from brine and diesel to something drier, older. Dust and aged paper. Faint perfume. Faded cigarette smoke. We pulled the boat onto a sandy bank just past a stone pier. I stepped onto land first. It felt like crossing a membrane, like moving through a veil into a world suspended in time. The air had a strange static quality. Not cold. Not warm. Just neutral. Weightless. Like the weather had been paused. The town loomed ahead. Neatly trimmed hedges. Lawns mowed in perfect stripes. Every window closed but not shuttered. Doors shut but not locked. A wind chime stirred once, 3 clear notes, and then fell silent. I turned to the others. No one said a word. We just stood there, 5 strangers on the shore of a place that shouldn't exist, staring at a town that looked like it had been plucked from the cover of a 1953 Homemaker's magazine. Then the fog behind us closed. Thick white final. And the ocean was gone. The streets felt warm beneath our boots, sun-baked cobblestone that somehow carried no shadows. The sun was overhead, bright but wrong. It gave off light but no heat. We walked into the town of Melridge like astronauts stepping onto a simulation of Earth. Everything was paused. That's the only word that fits. Not decayed. Not destroyed. Just suspended. Perfect and eerie. Curtains hung motionless in open windows. Lawn chairs sat slightly askew on porches, as if someone had just gotten up to answer the phone. Sprinklers clicked back and forth across green lawns without water. We heard a door creak in the distance but saw no one. No animals. Not even bugs. Just 5 of us, surrounded by ghostly domesticity. Nora was the first to step into a house. "Doors unlocked," she called over her shoulder, her voice oddly loud in the stillness. We followed her inside. The scent hit us first, like lemon wax, dust, and something else. Not rot. Not death. Just age. Like stepping into an attic you forgot existed. The kitchen was pristine. A pot sat on the stove, dried stew clinging to the edges. Plates and silverware waited on the table mid-meal. A slice of bread, half buttered. A glass of milk left sweating on a placemat, still cold. That stopped us. It's fresh, Clay said, touching the rim of the glass with his fingertip. This should have spoiled days ago. Weeks. Julie tapped the wall switch. Lights flickered once and died. She tried the sink. Water ran clean, then slowed to a trickle and stopped. Lucas walked into the living room. Clocks are frozen, he said after a moment. Everyone I've seen is stopped at 2:47. Same here, Nora added from the hallway where a grandfather clock loomed like a sentinel. 2:47 on the dot. I opened the fridge expecting mold and rot, but it was stocked like someone had gone grocery shopping that morning. Jars perfectly lined. Milk bottles fresh. Even a half-eaten pie, its crust flaking just so. No smell. No decay. Just stopped. What the hell is this? I muttered. Refrigeration this good doesn't exist. Even deep freeze units wouldn't preserve food like this. Not after 70 years. Julie snapped photos in silence. Then she moved to the mantel and lifted a small black and white family portrait. Guys, she said. We turned. She held the photo out. It showed a smiling family, mother, father, 2 kids in Sunday best, and standing just behind them, one hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder, was Clay. Or someone who looked exactly like Clay. Same face. Same eyes. Same slight curve of the jaw. The only difference was the haircut and the suit, both clearly from another era. Is this some kind of joke? Clay asked, taking the photo. Flip it, I said. On the back, someone had written in looping cursive. The Ballads, Easter Sunday, April 9, 1951. Jesus Christ, Clay whispered. This is impossible. Lucas stepped closer, peering at the image. No, it's not you. Not exactly. His hairline's higher. Chin's narrower. But, damn. It's close. Julie grabbed another photo from the hallway. This one showed a block party. People dancing under paper lanterns. Music equipment set up near the curb. A banner read, Melridge Centennial Celebration, July 4, 1951. In the background, behind a group of laughing teenagers, was the same boy from the first photo. Clay's double. The same eyes stared straight into the lens. But that would make him, what, 85 now? Nora said. Clay didn't answer. He just kept staring at the photo. We checked 3 more houses. All the same. Paused lives. Dinners waiting. Radios humming low static. Books left open mid-chapter. Every house frozen in the moment of 2:47. I found a journal on a bedside table in the 4th home. Its final entry read, July 16, 1954. Something is wrong with the sun. It hasn't moved in 2 days. Town hall says stay indoors. But I hear them on the rooftops at night. I think they're watching the clocks. I reread the entry twice, then closed the book. We need to get out, I said quietly. Julie looked up from filming. Now? Yes, I said. I don't care if it's 5 minutes or 5 hours, we're not staying the night. We stepped outside together. The sky was still bright. The exact same brightness it had when we landed. But the shadows had shifted. Slightly. And all the clocks we passed on the way back to the boat now read 2:48. The shift was subtle at first. Just a slight dissonance, like a voice heard a fraction of a second too late. Clay was the first to mention it. Did anyone else hear that? He asked, head tilting to one side like a dog hearing an odd tone. We were standing in the old school 2nd floor, sunlight bleeding through dusty windows. It sounded like me, but it came from the hallway. Lucas frowned. You talking to yourself again? No. I didn't say anything. But I heard it. It was my voice, saying exactly what I was thinking. A second before I thought it. No one laughed. We'd already passed that stage, jokes didn't land anymore. Not since the shadows moved and time ticked forward by a minute. 2:48. Now every watch, every clock, no matter where we found it, read the same time. The exact same minute. As if reality had taken a deep breath and never exhaled. We split into pairs to cover more ground. I stayed with Nora while Julie, Clay, and Lucas checked the Civic Center. We kept radios on, though the signal had started acting strange. Voices overlapping, snippets playing in reverse, words we didn't say. The mirror was in the nurse's office. Large, rectangular, ringed in dust and cracks. Nora was the one who saw it first. She froze mid-step, mouth parting slightly. Logan, she said. Look. I turned to the mirror. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just our reflections. But then, half a heartbeat later, my mirrored self blinked. I hadn't. Not yet. Then I did. And it blinked again after me. My heart stuttered. Is it delayed? I asked aloud. More than that, Nora whispered. It's not just behind. It's thinking. We stood, watching ourselves lag by seconds, then respond in ways that felt off. My reflection tilted its head slowly, thoughtfully, like it was waiting for something. Then it smiled. I did not. I grabbed Nora by the arm. Out, I said. Now. She didn't argue. The hallway outside was darker than it had been. The sun hadn't moved in the sky, but the shadows stretched across the floor like black fingers. I caught my breath and checked my reflection in a trophy case window as we passed. It didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. It just stared, eyes glassy and empty. Then it opened its mouth. I yanked my gaze away. Back at the street we regrouped. Julie looked pale. Something's happening with Clay, she said, eyes darting toward the building behind her. He kept seeing himself, kept hearing us, repeating things. He disappeared, Lucas said flatly. We were filming the old city hall. He was in front of the mirror and then, he wasn't. What do you mean he wasn't? I demanded. 1 second he was there. Next there was this shimmer. Like heat on asphalt. His outline kind of fluttered. Then he was gone. Julie showed me the footage. The camera was steady. Clay stood near a broken mirror, hand lifted. He touched the surface. There was a ripple. A blur. Then, nothing. His shape collapsed into static and vanished. The footage looped. It didn't change. We stood in silence. Then the sound returned. Faint. Echoing from the alley beside us. It was Clay. Guys? His voice echoed. Where did you all go? I just turned around. We ran toward the sound, but the alley was empty. A puddle reflected us. In it we saw ourselves running. But Clay wasn't there. Then the puddle shimmered, and in its depths we saw all of us again. Including Clay. Smiling. Bleeding. Watching us from behind the glass. Julie stepped back. We're not alone in this town. We never were. They're not ghosts, Nora whispered. They're reflections that stopped obeying. The sky stayed the same color. The same brightness. As if it had frozen along with everything else. But somewhere deep in the mirrors of Melridge, something had started to move. I woke to shouting. The early light filtering through the windows of the old fire station cast everything in copper and shadow. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Julie's voice cut through the silence, frantic and rising. I stumbled from my sleeping bag, heart pounding, and followed it into the adjoining bathroom where Lucas had spent the night. He stood at the sink, clutching the porcelain so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His face hovered inches from the mirror. What's happening to me? He whispered. Julie stood in the doorway, pale and wide-eyed, her camera dangling at her side. I stepped beside her. Lucas turned slowly. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment I didn't recognize him. Something was wrong. Subtle at first, his jaw sharper, nose straighter, skin tighter across the cheekbones. But it was him, wasn't it? Then he spoke. Logan, I don't know who I am anymore, he said. But it came out wrong. His voice had changed, still his, but layered with an accent that wasn't there the night before. The vowels warped, the cadence unfamiliar. Like a British actor poorly mimicking American speech, or maybe the other way around. Julie raised her camera, but her hands trembled. Say something else. Lucas looked at his reflection again. He swallowed hard. I went to bed and had dreams. I was walking down streets I've never seen. I had a name I didn't recognize. Matthew. People called me Matthew. And he lifted his shirt. The three of us stared in silence. A faint pattern, red and raw like a sunburn, curled across his abdomen and side. It wasn't random. Lines, squares, circles. At first it looked like an abstract tattoo. But it wasn't. Nora appeared behind us, her face tight with exhaustion. That's a map, she said, stepping closer. It looks like the town. She was right. Roads and intersections, tiny marks where buildings should be. But more than that, parts of the design moved. Slowly shifting beneath the skin like it was alive. Like it was updating. Lucas doubled over, clutching his stomach. It burns, he gasped. It feels like it's writing itself. I helped him back into the main room where he sat, shaking, on a pile of gear bags. Nora approached with her notebook, flipping through sketches she'd made of the town. She stopped on one, a rough layout of central Melridge, and compared it to the mark on Lucas's skin. They match, she said. Even down to the building placements. Lucas looked at her, sweat beading on his forehead. I've never been here before. Not before now. But when I looked in the mirror, I remembered faces. Names. My own voice sounded wrong. My own face looked wrong. He pointed toward the bathroom. That thing in the mirror? That wasn't me. Or maybe it was. But from before. Or after. I don't know. The air inside the firehouse felt suddenly thin. Pressurized. Like something watched from beyond the walls. I paced to the window. The streets outside remained eerily still. Sunlight hung in the air like syrup. Time still hadn't moved. Still 2:48. Julie reviewed footage from the night before. There's something else, she said, her voice barely audible over the buzzing of her equipment. I recorded Lucas snoring last night. Look at this. She played it. The camera had been running quietly in a corner of the fire station. We watched Lucas asleep, shifting slightly. Normal. Then he sat up. Eyes wide open. Except he didn't move like Lucas. His posture was too straight. His head turned slowly, deliberately, toward the camera. He whispered something. The audio barely picked it up. They'll come when the skin remembers. Then he lay back down. Lucas stared at the screen in horror. I don't remember doing that. I swear to God. I was asleep. Maybe it wasn't you, Nora said quietly. Not really. Lucas stood. I'm going back to the mirror. I need to see what it's doing to me. We tried to stop him, but he was already moving, frantic. He threw open the bathroom door. The mirror had cracked down the middle. Not broken, just one perfect fracture, a line bisecting the reflection of his face. His reflection smiled at him. Lucas didn't. He backed away, eyes wide. Did you see that? He gasped. It's not following me anymore. Then the reflection leaned forward and whispered something against the glass. We couldn't hear it. But Lucas staggered backward like he'd been struck. What did it say? Julie asked. Lucas clutched his head. It said, "Welcome back." Nora scribbled notes furiously. If this place, this town, is some kind of dimensional echo, then maybe it's trying to replace us. Or remember us. Or both. The town's writing itself, I said aloud, the thought crystallizing. And we're becoming part of the story. I looked at Lucas. His skin shimmered faintly beneath his shirt. The lines of the map deepening. Like the ink of a freshly printed page. Like it had always been there. And was finally revealing itself. It started with the sidewalk. A soft crunch beneath my boot, like stepping on frost-glazed leaves, except there were none. Just concrete rippling subtly underfoot like cooling magma. I stopped walking. The others did too. Did the street just move? Julie asked. We stood at the corner of Hollis and Bell. At least that's what the rusted street signs above us claimed. But I was certain this intersection had been 2 blocks west just hours ago. It's like the whole town's bending, Nora said, watching a row of houses across the street shimmer slightly, the edges of their rooftops curling as if the air had turned viscous. She turned in a slow circle. This isn't the same layout we mapped yesterday. She was right. The grocery store now faced a cul-de-sac that didn't exist before. The post office had merged with what used to be a laundromat, signage fused like melted plastic. I turned to Lucas, who hadn't spoken since that morning. His skin was flushed and sweat collected at his brow. I think it's adjusting, he whispered. I think it's learning us. Folding around us. Julie cursed softly and backed away from the shifting street corner. This is a trap. A growing one. No, Nora said. It's adapting. Same thing I wanted to say but didn't. There was a church at the end of the block. Brick with a broken bell tower, stained glass windows dulled by decades of grime. The cross at the peak hung sideways, twisted like it was melting. Something about it drew the eye. And Nora. I want to check inside, she said suddenly, already walking. Wait, I called. Let's stick together. But she didn't respond. Didn't even look back. She entered the church through heavy wooden doors that groaned shut behind her. We waited outside for 10 minutes. Then 20. Then an hour. The sun hadn't moved. Shadows remained locked in place. Time didn't tick. My watch still read 2:48. Julie knocked on the door. No response. We pried it open. Inside, darkness. Colder than it should have been. Stale air pressed against us like wet wool. The pews were empty, the altar covered in dust, the stained glass windows casting no light at all. No sign of Nora. But her bag lay against a front pew. Her journal inside. Her phone beside it, screen cracked, smeared with something that looked like ash. Lucas picked it up. The screen flickered, then lit up with a single video thumbnail. We watched. The footage showed Nora in the back of the church, seated on the floor, legs crossed. Her breathing shallow. Around her stood several figures, tall, unmoving, vaguely human but with blank, smooth ovals for faces. No eyes. No mouths. Just presence. Nora spoke softly, but the audio was garbled. She reached forward and picked something up from the floor, a piece of charred meat or maybe wood. She bit into it. Again. And again. The camera shook as if being held by something alive but unskilled. At the edge of the frame, one of the faceless figures moved closer, tilting its head. Nora didn't flinch. She kept chewing. Her eyes looked vacant. And she smiled. The video ended. None of us moved. Lucas held out the phone. "That wasn't Nora," he said. "She walked in," Julie whispered, "and they rewrote her." I looked around the sanctuary, every shadow a threat, every flicker of movement along the walls something unseen. The church pulsed faintly, walls subtly breathing. The floor trembled underfoot. Julie grabbed her gear. "We're not safe here. Anywhere. This town isn't collapsing. It's shedding. Peeling back layers." We left quickly. Outside, the streets had warped again. The diner now faced itself, a mirror of the building across from it. Windows showed reflections that lagged behind real motion like old film reels catching up. I turned down Bell Street and found myself back at the church. "No," I muttered. We walked the other way. Lucas's map skin had changed again. Now his shoulder bore a new street, one I hadn't seen before. "It's adding," he whispered. "It's rewriting itself with every choice we make." Julie froze beside a hydrant. "Where's the SUV?" I looked. The vehicle we'd arrived in, parked on the outskirts of town, had vanished. In its place, an old station wagon with 1950s plates. Time didn't pass in Melridge. It looped, twisted, buried itself alive. We returned to the fire station in silence. That night I dreamed of Nora. But she wasn't her. She stood at the altar of the church, surrounded by faceless shapes, skin marked with intricate lines, her mouth full of something twitching. And behind her, the pews were filled with shadows, all watching me. The school loomed like a carcass on the edge of the distorted grid. Its windows blinked with fractured sunlight, glass smeared as though fingers had dragged across the inside. The air grew thicker as we approached, moist and metallic like blood on pennies. Lucas had grown pale. He hadn't said much since we left the warped church. He walked slower now, dragging one leg slightly. The lines on his skin, his map, had deepened as if inked into flesh with pressure instead of pigment. Julie stopped in front of the double doors. "Why here?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "It just feels like it's pulling." Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. The floor was warped, the linoleum bubbling as if heat had risen from below at some point. Lockers lined the walls, all sealed shut. The bell above the main hallway had fallen, cracked on the floor like a broken jawbone. The principal's office held nothing but dust and an overturned chair. But behind the janitor's closet we found the stairs. Narrow. Descending. The basement smelled of mildew and iron. The light from my flashlight passed over old school supplies, desks stacked like barricades, and then the archive. An entire chamber behind rusting metal doors. Walls of filing cabinets, shelves stacked high with blackened ledgers, cardboard boxes stained with time. The air here was still. Not dead, listening. Julie lifted a ledger and opened it gently. Her breath caught. "Look at this." Pages from the 1700s, yellowed and brittle. The ink hadn't faded. "Attendance records," she whispered. "Class rosters." Lucas stepped forward and read aloud. "Samuel Whitcomb. Delilah Harper. Theodore Gray." He stopped. Flipped a page. Again, Samuel Whitcomb. Delilah Harper. Theodore Gray. He flipped further. Same names. Every decade. Julie pulled another ledger. 1874, same names. Another. 1909, still the same. They kept appearing, again and again. Same full names, same handwriting. Same portraits clipped inside. The ink drawings didn't age. The faces remained young. "That's impossible," Lucas said. "Or this place isn't following our time," Julie replied. "It has its own." In the far corner of the room I found a large trunk. Dust thick as velvet coated the lid. I opened it. Inside, children's drawings. Hundreds. Stick figures holding hands. Crude houses. Sons with smiling faces. Then stranger ones, figures with long arms and no eyes. Trees with screaming mouths. One page showed a tall man made entirely of teeth. And then, one drawing made my breath freeze. A child had drawn me. The figure stood beside the school, labeled in a shaky scrawl. Logan. Same brown jacket. Same stubble. Same scar above the eyebrow. I turned the page over. 1982. 2 years before the town vanished. Julie leaned over my shoulder. That's you. It can't be, I whispered. This isn't possible. Lucas began rifling through the boxes. They knew us. They expected us. Julie picked up a roll of microfilm. She unspooled it under the light of her phone. Newspaper clippings. Obituaries. One name recurred again and again. Logan Parker, she read. Died July 14, 1984. Died July 14, 1954. Died July 14, 1924. Always the same day. The film snapped in her hands. I'm not from here, I said quietly. No, Julie replied. But this town thinks you are. A faint sound drifted through the air. Rustling. Paper fluttered on its own. The ledgers began to open one by one, pages turning as if flipped by invisible fingers. Lucas backed toward the door. We need to go. I reached for the drawing, but something had changed. The child's sketch had blinked. Where the eyes once were simple dots, they were now black pits leaking ink. Then came the sound. Steps. Not ours. Approaching slowly from the stairwell. We killed our lights and crouched low. Through the crack under the archive door we saw something pass, a shadow with no source. Tall. Angular. Pausing just long enough that the very air around it seemed to bend. When it moved on we stayed frozen for a full minute. Then Julie whispered, it was guarding this place. Guarding me, I said, staring at the drawing still clutched in my hand. We left the archive in silence. And in my coat pocket the paper felt warm. Alive. Like the child who had drawn me never left, and might still be waiting for me to finish something I hadn't started yet. It began with the dreams. At first, scattered fragments, half-remembered visions that faded like mist at dawn. But then they synchronized. We all dreamed of the same thing. A forest that breathed, trees pulsing like lungs. And voices, ours but not quite, whispering numbers and symbols in a language we didn't know but somehow understood. When I woke, I found my hand trembling, smeared with charcoal. On the wall beside my cot, I'd drawn a symbol in thick strokes. 3 overlapping circles with a jagged line threading through all 3. Julie stood in the doorway staring at it. Her eyes were glassy, ringed with red. I've seen that before. Where? She lifted her sleeve. The same symbol burned faintly into her forearm. I woke up with it. Lucas was already pacing the room. This island isn't a place, he muttered. It's a pattern. A system. And we're the input. He hadn't slept. Not since we left the school. The veins in his face had darkened, almost black, spiderwebbing across his skin. Lucas, I said gently, you need rest. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Rest? You think any of this is real enough for rest? We're here, we're alive. No, we're not. He turned, jabbing a finger at Julie. You said the records repeated names. Faces. Logan, you were in a drawing. You think this is coincidence? Calm down. No. Lucas shouted. This island thinks for us. It's simulating our decisions before we make them. We're shadows in its mind. Julie moved toward him slowly. Lucas? He flinched from her. Don't come near me. You're already part of it. Then he grabbed a nail from the floor and carved another symbol into the wood. A perfect match to the ones in the archive. You're sleep drawing too, I said. He looked at me, then past me. We're converging, he whispered. Every thought becoming the same. Like cells in one brain. I wanted to argue. But he wasn't wrong. When I slept again that night, I found myself in the forest, same as before, but this time I wasn't alone. Julie was there, her face split down the center, mirrored halves misaligned. She moved toward me without walking, just drifting forward like paper in wind. Her mouth opened and a voice came out that wasn't hers. You are the remembrance. The fold. The echo. I woke gasping. Julie was sitting across from me, carving the symbol into her notebook with a pencil. Dozens of pages had been filled. Her hands moved mechanically, her eyes unfocused. Julie, I said. She stopped, blinking. Did you dream? She nodded slowly. The island showed me the beginning. The beginning of what? Us. Before I could ask more, we heard the scream. It came from deeper in the town, from the corner house near the flooded garden. A sharp, ragged sound that started human but ended in something else. We ran. The house belonged to Decker, our technician. He'd been quiet for hours. Claimed he needed space. The front door was ajar, swinging in the breeze. Inside it smelled wrong. Like copper and earth. We found him in the bedroom. Or what remained. Decker was crouched in the corner, but his body was bending in ways it shouldn't. His back arched over itself, his knees twisted inward, neck craned completely backward. Bones jutted against skin like wires under plastic. He turned toward us, but there was no recognition in his eyes. And then he blurred. That's the only way I can describe it. His edges smeared like a camera out of focus. The air around him rippled, and then he was gone. Not vanished. Deleted. Jesus Christ, Julie whispered. Lucas dropped to his knees, holding his head. It's editing us. What? Like a draft. A manuscript. One idea at a time. Rewriting what doesn't fit. I staggered out into the street, gasping for air that felt thicker by the second. The sun above seemed frozen, locked in perpetual late afternoon. Julie followed, her face pale. It's accelerating. What is? Whatever this place is doing to us. Lucas remained inside, muttering something over and over. When we coaxed him out, his eyes were bloodshot, pupils too wide. He looked up and said, "We're not explorers. We're characters. And it's almost finished writing us." That night we didn't sleep. We took turns watching each other. Julie kept drawing. Lucas spoke in phrases that didn't sound like him anymore. And I began to hear my own voice whispering from the corners of every room, telling me stories I hadn't lived yet. Something had cracked. And I knew, next time I closed my eyes, I might not be the one who woke up. The rain had started again, though I hadn't seen a single cloud in the sky since we arrived. I wandered from the central square alone, driven by a pressure I couldn't locate. Lucas and Julie were arguing when I slipped away. Their words were nonsense now, echoes of people cracking from the inside. I understood them better than I wanted to admit. The sign above the building was rusted and swinging in the breeze. Grand Theater, air-cooled, 35 cents matinee. I stepped inside. The air was cold. Genuinely cold, like walking into a meat locker. Dust particles floated in columns of dim light streaming through a cracked skylight. The seats, red velvet and torn, faced a massive screen that shimmered with pale light. A film was playing. I hadn't heard a projector. No sound. Just a flickering reel of something. I moved closer. The screen showed a grainy black and white film. A man standing at the edge of a dock. Tall. Brown hair. Worn flannel. He turned toward the camera. It was me. I stumbled backward. The man, me, walked down a wooden pier and climbed into a small boat. He looked older. Maybe 40. His face was tired, eyes sunken. The screen jumped. Now older, I was in a different place. Standing in a room that looked like an operating theater. A crowd of faceless people sat in the darkness. I spoke in a language I didn't know and they nodded in sync. The film flickered. Another version of me, younger this time, no more than 20. In military fatigues. Walking through the same town square we had just passed. He stopped and touched the same lamppost Julie leaned against earlier that day. The reel buzzed. On screen, the young me looked directly at the camera and smiled. He knew. I turned and ran. I nearly tripped over the seats. I crashed through the exit door into a hallway lined with old movie posters. Only when I looked again, the faces on the posters, they were all me. Dressed differently. In roles that didn't exist. The lighthouse keeper, midnight astronaut, inheritor of flesh. Each poster bore a different year. 1911, 1943, 1978. All with my face. All with different taglines. He's always been here. A return is not a beginning. Memory is the most fragile illusion. The hallway seemed to bend as I walked. The light shifted from pale gold to a harsh blue. I found myself back in the lobby. The concession stand still held boxes of popcorn, fresh, still warm. The girl behind the counter blinked at me. I hadn't seen her there a moment ago. "You're late for your showing, Mr. Parker," she said, smiling. "I didn't buy a ticket." "You never have to." Her name tag read Marla, though the face beneath it was blank. No eyes. Just a faint impression like someone had pressed their thumb into clay. I backed away slowly. The doors behind me had vanished. In their place, another corridor stretched out, lined with mirrors. Each one reflected a version of me walking in sync, some with scars, some in suits, one in a hospital gown. Only one version stopped and stared directly at me. He pressed his palm to the glass. I matched the gesture. Our hands didn't align. His had 6 fingers. I blinked and he was gone. Somewhere down the corridor, the sound of a projector restarting echoed. The lights flickered. A voice on the intercom said, "Intermission is over. Return to your reality." I turned and the concession stand was empty. I ran back toward the main theater. The seats were filled now. Hundreds of figures sat silently, all facing the screen. All identical. All me. On the screen, a film played showing the exact events of our arrival. The boat. The malfunctioning equipment. Julie's laugh. Lucas arguing with Decker. Everything we'd lived. But it kept going. It showed scenes that hadn't happened yet. It showed me kneeling over Julie's body. It showed Lucas screaming as the sky fractured above him. It showed myself, alone, sitting in a chair facing a door that would never open. And then the screen went white. Text appeared in flickering black letters. You've been here 12 times. You leave when you end the story right. I turned slowly to look at the audience. They were all gone. Only the faint outline of ash remained in each seat. I stepped outside and found myself not on the theater steps, but on the dock. The one from the film. A boat rocked gently in the water. The sky above was lavender, timeless. I looked down and saw my reflection. It blinked after I did. And I understood. This place wasn't just remembering me. It was rehearsing me. Again. And again. Until I made the right choice. And this time, I didn't even know what the question was. The voice came first. It wasn't spoken. Not really. It was more like a tension behind my eyes, a pressure in my lungs when I inhaled the warm, unnaturally fragrant air of the town. The sensation of breath being shared with something massive. I was sitting on the roof of the old post office when it began, watching the sun trace its usual slow arc across the sky. Except it wasn't the sun. Not exactly. I had begun to notice the light here didn't cast shadows correctly. At noon, objects had halos instead of outlines. Light didn't illuminate so much as inhabit things. That's when it whispered, or pressed the thought into my skull. You're beginning to see. I bolted upright. My chest tightened as if a hand had wrapped around my ribs. The buildings around me shimmered slightly like heat distortion, but the air was cool. The skyline quivered and something in me responded. See more. The post office roof cracked beneath my feet as I scrambled down. Every window I passed in the town reflected not what was outside, but me staring in, frozen in odd poses, at times with my mouth open in a scream I hadn't made. Julie was gone. Lucas had disappeared 2 nights ago after screaming that the houses were shifting in the dark. Decker vanished sometime before sunrise. His sleeping bag torn, his recorder melted into the concrete like it had been poured there. I was alone now. At least I thought I was. Until I looked down. Beneath the town square, the cobblestones no longer felt solid. The patterns in the stones seemed to breathe. A steady pulse throbbed beneath my boots, a rhythm like a heartbeat. I crouched and placed my palm on the ground. Warm. Throbbing. Alive. I pressed my ear to the cobblestones. What I heard didn't make sense. Wet, slippery sounds like the inside of a throat. Whispers too. Chanting? No, neural firing. Not speech. Not thought. Signal. I stood, my breath shaky, and began to walk. My legs took me where they wanted, not where I chose. To the church. Again. This time, the doors opened before I touched them. Inside, the pews were gone. In their place, long cords stretched from the altar, thick and glistening, looping into the floor and walls like arteries. The entire structure vibrated with low sound, like whale song played backward. The stained glass flickered. When I turned to leave, the entrance was gone. A staircase wound downward beneath the pulpit, one I hadn't noticed before. It smelled like hot copper and something sweet, rotting fruit maybe. I descended, each step wet beneath my boots. The stairwell opened into a cavern. No, a chamber. The buildings above were not just facades. They were caps, masks on something far older and infinitely more disturbing. Veins ran along the walls, glowing faintly. In the center of the room stood what I can only describe as a heart. 50 feet tall. It beat slowly, rhythmically. Around it, organs. Not human. Vaguely insectal. Or perhaps mammalian, but scaled like nothing on Earth. Tendrils connected every organ to the chamber walls. I saw where streets from above pierced downward like nerves, feeding into this thing. And I understood. The town is alive. More than alive. Where? It was a brain. Not metaphorically. Literally. I stood inside a structure that was thinking. And we, my team, the boats before us, the ones we'd read about in the journals, were part of its synaptic pattern. We were neurons. And it was learning us. Images flashed in my mind. Me in childhood, reading on my grandmother's couch. Me arguing with my father. Me waking up in my first apartment. Then, images I didn't recognize. A version of me made of bark and shadow. A version of me with hollow eyes and a mouth that unzipped like cloth. A version of me standing at the center of this neural cathedral, wires pierced into my skull. The voice returned, stronger now. The more you see, the more you shape. We show you what you offer. I stumbled backward and realized that the walls were shifting again. Flesh folding open, revealing more tunnels, more chambers. A living maze. I was inside a responsive organism. A biomechanical god built from memory and attention. As I moved, it moved. I turned left, the hallway opened. I thought of Julie, her scent, something like lavender and machine oil, filled the space. Perception is participation, the voice said. I started to understand. We hadn't discovered this island. We hadn't even entered it. We'd been integrated. My flashlight flickered and then projected not a beam, but a vision. The beam illuminated a table, dinner set for 6. My family, long dead, sat around it. Except their faces were blank. Paper white, smoothed over like wax mannequins. They turned to me in unison. "Welcome home, Logan." I ran. The floor pulsed harder. Like it was excited. I climbed the stairway, stumbling, hands slick with sweat, or was it fluid from the walls? Bursting into the light above, I found myself not in the church, but in the school auditorium. It had rearranged again. All the doors were mirrors. All of them reflected versions of me screaming, laughing, rotting, embracing. A dozen lives. 1,000 timelines. And I saw, finally, what it had tried to show me from the beginning. Attention feeds it. Observation births form. The more we saw, the more complex it became. The more questions we asked, the more detailed its answers. It wasn't just living. It was becoming. Becoming what we feared. What we remembered. What we wanted. And now that only I remained, it had shaped itself for me alone. I fell to my knees in the center of the auditorium, shaking. It whispered one last thing. "You complete the pattern." The lights overhead flickered red. And I screamed, because I knew what came next wasn't revelation. It was merging. I no longer trusted time. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky above the island was cloudless, a static painting of late afternoon warmth, then black. Thunder rolled from every direction like it was coming from beneath the earth rather than the heavens. The air turned metallic, sharp on the tongue, like biting into foil. Lightning didn't flash so much as strobe, flickering snapshots of impossible shapes in the clouds, elongated limbs that stretched too far between pulses of light. And the town responded. The buildings groaned as if they had bones. Windows bled condensation that rolled upward, defying gravity. Streets twisted in real-time, intersections shifting like clock gears. I watched as the grocery store folded into the laundromat, its walls bubbling before snapping into new alignments. The town was boiling itself. Something in the atmosphere cracked and I heard screaming. Not from above. From inside the ground. I staggered toward the dock. I wasn't alone. Omar was there. Or what was left of him. His face was wrong. Subtle at first glance. Too smooth, too symmetrical, like a wax replica of a man who used to be. But his eyes were real. Panicked. Trapped. "They won't let us leave," he whispered. "They don't need to. We already belong." I reached out, but he recoiled, backing toward the edge of the dock where the boat still bobbed against the rotted wood, tethered loosely. The same boat we had arrived in. Somehow untouched by time, grime, or alteration. I glanced behind me. The town had changed again. Now it was looking at us. The windows glowed. A low hum vibrated in my teeth. Structures swayed slightly, leaning forward like curious animals sniffing prey. Omar clutched his head. "They're in me, Logan. I hear them now. Not just the voice, not just a voice. All of them. Talking, screaming, laughing, praying. And me, I'm there too." He turned. The light from the windows behind him painted his silhouette with a flickering halo. His shadow twisted unnaturally, lagging a half-second behind his movements. I think I've been here before," he muttered. "In another life. In all of them." "Omar," I said, stepping closer, "we have to go. Now." "No, no, no," he said, smiling through tears. "There's no going. We never came here. We returned." He turned and walked into the sea. Not into the boat, into the water. I screamed his name. He never looked back. Just kept walking deeper and deeper, until the waves folded over him without a splash, like water reclaiming something it had loaned out. I didn't wait. I dove into the boat and cut the line. My hands trembled as I started the motor. It responded instantly. The town watched me. Every window pulsed with synchronized light. Then a ripple. The water ahead shimmered. For a moment, it looked like I was sailing into a mirror. The reflection was wrong. It showed the boat but empty. No me. The engine roared as I pushed forward, refusing to look back. Wind tore at my face. Rain hammered down. The world was dissolving into chaos around me and still I pressed on. 50 yards out. The town faded behind. 100 yards. The storm screamed. 200. Thunk. The boat stopped. Not like it hit something. Like it was caught. I turned. The island was ahead of me. The same dock. The same houses. The same pulsing windows. I had returned. I had never left. I screamed until my throat went raw. Then something snapped inside me. A sensation like tearing Velcro deep behind my eyes. Static flooded my mind, then silence. I was alone. No voices. No whispers. Just my own breath, ragged and terrified. I looked at my hands. They were mine. My thoughts were quiet. Not calm, just mine again. I realized something. The connection could be broken. Not easily. Not forever. But long enough. I restarted the motor. Again I pushed into the waves. This time I closed my eyes. I sang. Nonsense. Old songs. Anything to drown out the creeping intrusion. When I opened my eyes, the island was gone. Only water. A vast, dark ocean beneath a bruised sky. Behind me, nothing. Ahead, a storm. Full and feral. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I wasn't being watched anymore. But even then, as the boat rocked beneath me and the wind screamed louder than my thoughts, I felt a tug in the base of my skull. A whisper I almost didn't notice. "We miss you already." I woke to white. Ceiling tiles. Linens. Light filtered through pale curtains. The air smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, tinged with something stale. A soft beeping tracked my heartbeat, slow and steady. A hospital. I blinked. My mouth was dry. My limbs were heavy. A nurse entered. She smiled, but her eyes didn't match. "Mr. Parker," she said. "You're safe. You've been through a lot." I tried to speak. My throat rasped out something unintelligible. She handed me a cup of water. "Don't worry. You're in good hands now." I didn't ask the obvious questions. Where am I? How did I get here? How long have I been here? Part of me already knew. I was home, but something was wrong. Everything was too quiet. The nurse left. A man in a dark suit came in next. No ID badge. Clipboard in hand. Sunglasses indoors. He asked me things I didn't understand. "What's the last thing you remember? Do you have any photos? Do you recall a place called Hesper?" The name stabbed something in me. I flinched. I think I dreamed it." I lied. He studied me, then nodded. "Good. Dreams aren't dangerous. You'll be moved soon. Somewhere more comfortable." Then he left. I stayed in that room for 3 more days. I asked for my phone, my camera, my journal. They gave me a blank notebook and a pen that didn't write. On the 4th day I demanded to see my team. They looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "There was no team," they said. I begged them to check. "Show me the files. Pull the photos. Look at the footage." They brought in a monitor and played back what they claimed was from my last expedition. Static. Footage of an empty sea. A dock with no people. Snapshots of an island that didn't exist. Wherever my team had been in the frame, they were now just absences. Blurs. Flickers. Gaps in light. Like they'd been erased, frame by frame. They showed me a photograph taken when they recovered me. I was lying on the dock, unconscious. Alone. No footprints but mine. They handed me a mirror next. My face looked correct, but something felt misaligned. I turned to ask the nurse if anything looked strange, but there was no nurse. I was alone again. I tried to sketch my team. Couldn't remember their faces. I scratched at the paper, frustrated, until my fingers cramped. I could draw their outlines: Victor's tall, crooked stance, Lena's short curls, Omar's wide shoulders, but not their eyes, not their expressions. Their features slipped from memory like sand from fingers. They were gone. Every night I lay in that bed, ceiling staring down at me. Every night I heard them. Not voices, but the hum. Oh, constant, pulsing. The same frequency as the town's windows. As the street's breath. The same pitch I had felt in my bones when the town showed its true face. I stopped asking for updates. For answers. I stopped pretending I didn't remember. I knew now, I had never escaped. The island wasn't a place. Not anymore. It was a condition. A transformation. I carry it in my cells. In my gaze. If I close my eyes, I see the houses. The diner. The school with its infinite hallways. And beneath them, the neurons. The thoughts. The watchers. I know why the government keeps me isolated. They think I'm infected. They think I might trigger something. They're right. But not in the way they expect. One evening they let me out for a walk. The compound grounds were surrounded by high fences and guards who never smiled. The sun dipped low, casting orange light across the grass. I walked slowly. Then I saw it. A mirror in the nurse's break room. Just a glance. But in the reflection behind me stood a diner booth. Red vinyl. Empty coffee cups. A waitress frozen mid-smile. I spun. Nothing but grass and a bench. But when I looked again, closer, I saw a glimmer in the mirror's depth. A flicker. A town. Waiting. I turned away. I pressed my hands to my ears. Still, the hum. Still, the pulse. Every night the images come sharper. Every morning I remember a little more. Last night I remembered my real name. It wasn't Logan Parker. It never was. That name belonged to one version of me. One iteration. One layer of the loop. The others still walk Hesper's streets. I feel them when I breathe. When I blink. When I stare too long at nothing. The town is still watching. I'm not supposed to remember. But I do. And one night when they leave the door unlocked. When the stars are right. When I finally remember the road that leads back. I will return.